Greetings, my name is Yaroslav, I'm from Ukraine, and in this episode I'm going to present to you facts and arguments that, when put together, paint a clear picture that modern-day Russia is an empire.
The aggressive impulses of an evil empire.
To start, we need to define what empire is, what characteristics it possesses. To help me define the attributes of an empire, I asked good old Chat GPT. And this is what it came up with. Number 1. Expansionism. Empires characterized by strong desire to expand their territorial boundaries. Well, I mean, can't argue with that one. Number 2. Centralization. Empires often have a highly centralized system of government with power and authority concentrated in the hands of a single ruler. Touché. Empire without an emperor isn't really an empire. Number 3. Diversity. Empires often include diverse populations, languages and cultures that are brought under common political umbrella. Well, that one makes sense. Number 4. Control. Empires are known for their ability to exert control over their subjects through various means such as military force, economic dominance, or cultural hegemony. Attribute number 5 is imperialism. The use of political and economical power to dominate and exploit other nations or peoples. Well, to me this sounds like a core attribute of any empire, to exploit whatever they conquer. And the last 6th characteristic of an empire is legacy. Empires leave a lasting impact on the regions and peoples they dominate, shaping their history, culture and political systems for generations to come. So now let's see just how well modern-day Russia matches them all. And if it does, that means it's an empire. And if it's an empire, that means it's gonna collapse. Interestingly enough though, when I asked Chat GPT if modern-day Russia is an empire, it gave me a clear answer of no, which is kind of rare for an AI to give such a certain answer. How could it be sure, right? But what it basically does is reads from Russian constitution about it being a federative republic. But reading from Russian constitution is a bit naive and funny. USSR also had a constitution that guaranteed its citizens freedom of speech. Yeah, right. So anyway, let's proceed to the first attribute of an empire. Muscovy territorial expansion has been a defining characteristic of its sole existence. And of course, recently in 2014, Russia expanded by annexing Crimea, and also during the war that's happening right now, they hastily annexed territory of Ukraine, some of which that they did not even control, which clearly demonstrates that expansionist nature. If you point on Russia's map today anywhere outside of Moscow, that territory and peoples living there were conquered. Just to name a few examples: war with Novgorod to the north, where Novgorod Republic was absorbed by Muscovy. Smolensk Wars, consisting of many battles conquering west of Muscovy and capturing Belarusian region of Smolensk. Wars with Kazan and Astrakhan Khanate, lasting over hundreds of years, conquering east and south. Russian conquest of Siberia that took over 2 centuries and resulted in conquering of dozens of indigenous people. Caucasian War to the far south. Muscovy conquest of Central Asia that took over 150 years, where they conquered Turkmen, Kazakh and Kyrgyz tribes. Amur annexation, where Russia took Chinese territory in the 18th century. The Winter War with Finns, as just as recently as 80 years ago, where Russia annexed 9% of Finnish territory that is theirs till today. And last example, Muscovy-Ukrainian War. Actually, Ukraine and Muscovy had a lot of wars across centuries. We were never allies. So there it is, the first attribute of an empire I think matches perfectly to the modern-day Russia. Empires like Russian, where expansionism is at the core of their existence, so they either expand or they fall. Combine that with the fact that they appropriated Ukrainian or Russian history but don't control Kiev, you get a clear recipe why they started this war and why they're continuing it for over a year now, despite it being devastating to them. God forbid if Ukraine falls and Russia prevails, their expansionist ambitions not gonna go away. They're gonna be reinforced and become even stronger. And in 5-10 years, Russia will gather more strength and will undoubtedly go into a NATO state like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania or Poland, which will make United States directly involved. And Russia is not gonna be alone when it's gonna do that. China most likely gonna ally with Russia too. This is a really gloomy forecast for the future, and the only force currently capable of preventing that future is Ukraine armed forces. In the description of this video, I'm gonna leave a PayPal email of an activist, Arkady Babchenko. He's an ex-Russian journalist and one of the best critics of Kremlin regime I've ever seen. I'm not affiliated to him in any way, but I love his texts, and now he's devoting his life to helping Ukrainian armed forces by providing cars, specialty cars equipped for special needs. He also packs those cars with a bunch of medical supplies and other goodies. So please make at least a $1 donation to him for a good cause. Lastly, in this segment, I want to add an old Russian saying: Russia has only two allies, Navy and the Army, that I think perfectly summarizes their conquering nature. Today, Russia has a highly centralized system of government. Although technically in the constitution it is defined as a federation, this does not correspond to reality. In 2004 they have cancelled governor elections, making them appointed by Putin directly, thus tightening his centralized rule. Russia has a facade of a democracy by imitating elections that are all rigged. Funny enough, they don't even hide the fact that they're rigging the elections. The facade of the democracy is also supported by the fact that Parliament of Russia has multi-parties in there. However, all those political parties are loyal to Putin and will never go against him. The real opposition in Russia can't even run for the elections because there is no opposition in Russia. It has been murdered, imprisoned, or exiled. So, if we peek behind the facade, we'll see that all power in Russia is concentrated in the hands of one short man who controls all the political systems, who controls all the media, who appoints his loyal friends to key positions in the government. A truly unlimited power, that one equal to a monarch or the emperor, making his rule to be 24 years and unfortunately counting. Consider this interesting fact: some Russians who were born under Putin have been mobilized to his war and have been killed under Putin, never even seeing any other ruler. Another fun fact: Putin never participated in debates, even though he won presidential elections 3 times. Well, after all, why would an emperor need to condescend himself to debate anyone? Third attribute, diversity. The correspondence of Russia to this attribute is pretty evident as well. Russia is one of the most diverse countries in the world. By surface area, Russia is just a bit bigger than the dwarf planet of Pluto. So, while conquering all those huge amounts of lands, it didn't just capture territory, it captured many indigenous peoples living there. In Russia, there are 190 different ethnic groups with over 100 languages spoken. Just to name a few groups living there: Chechens, Chukchi, Mari, Tajik, Tuvans, Kovi, Yazidis, Buryats, and so on and so on and so on. So the main question here is, does Russia respect all those minorities? Like, do they have some autonomy and self-governance? Do they have freedoms to cultivate their unique culture, and are they being represented in a government somehow? The answer to all of those questions is no, not quite. But I'll have to cover that topic in another video, and I have something really interesting for you, because while being in Norwegian asylum camp, I have met a person who fled from Russia, a representative of Sami people, who, because to a real threat of his life in Russia, had to flee the country because he was promoting Sami culture a little bit more than Russians liked it. But anyway, for the purposes of this video, I think it's pretty clear that with 190 different ethnic groups, Russia clearly matches the attribute of an empire: diversity. Fourth attribute, control. Non-empires do not meddle in the internal affairs of other countries, but empires do, and Russia is not shying away from using any of the methods to exert its control. We clearly see how they're using force to try to control Ukraine now. Earlier they've used force on Syria, Georgia, Moldova. What's also not on the surface is how they used force in many African countries. They did that covertly by using private military group Vagner. But Wagner is by no means private. It's an army operated directly by Kremlin. Vox came out with a really good investigation about this, so check it out if you are curious. Besides, today in the war on Ukraine we see how Wagner is employing heavier artillery, tanks, jet fighters. Do you happen to know any private army that's using jet fighters? So anyway, it's beneficial to Russia when Europe and United States are divided. Thus, they're being preoccupied with their own problems. Thus, they cannot stay united against Russia's attack on democracy and cannot impose sanctions effectively against Russia, because if sanctions are not synchronized, then they're not as effective. And I'm going to present some evidence showing how Russia is trying to divide European Union and United States. So Russia created a migrant problem in Europe by deliberately threatening the lives of many Syrian civilians. Russia is sponsoring far-right political separatist movements all over Europe. For example, in France, gave a loan to presidential candidate Marine Le Pen, who openly stated she wanted France to leave NATO. Wouldn't that be perfect for Putin, right? In Italy, Matteo Silvani's far-right Lega party has struck an oil deal with Russia. In Austria, Heinz Christian Strache, the leader of the far-right Freedom Party, was filmed trying to accept a bribe from a Russian oligarch in Ibiza. In Germany, dear Germany, it's like a headquarters of Russian lobby in the center of Europe operating freely. For decades, Germany has been completely under Russia's influence, hooked on their cheap natural gas. And when Trump warned Germany about being overly dependent on Russia, they laughed at his warnings.
Germany will become totally dependent on Russian energy if it does not immediately change course. Here in the Western Hemisphere, we are committed to maintaining our independence from the encroachment of expansionist foreign powers.
I went and checked the tape. That was in real time the reaction of the German diplomatic delegation at the UN. They were incapable, as diplomats ought to be, of hiding their feelings, and I would say quite derisory feelings.
That's how strong Russian control was in Germany. Naturally, they regret it now. So Russia, without exaggerations, spends billions of dollars on propaganda to corrupt minds and to do its biddings. From statistics I found, they spend about $1.5 billion annually on media. But I bet this number is even higher. Naturally, it's not going to be an open source number. They have two major news channels, the RT and Sputnik, operating solely in foreign languages to the foreign viewers. During France's presidential elections, those channels were pouring a lot of dirt on Macron's campaign, trying to influence it so that the earlier mentioned Marine Le Pen would win. But luckily that didn't happen. Watch what Macron says about those news channels and also pay attention to Putin's face being humiliated.
Madame. Donc on va se dire les choses en vérité.
Russia
mais
Today
Russia Today
and Sputnik
et Sputnik
did
ne se
not
sont pas
behave like media
comportés
organizations
comme
or journalists,
des organes de presse et des journalistes, mais ils se sont comportés
but they
comme
behaved
des
like
organes
organs of influence
d'influence,
and
de
false
propagande
propaganda,
et de
no more,
propagande
no less.
mensongère, ni plus ni moins.
Yep, Macron said it beautifully. Russia is also really innovative when it comes to methods to exert their influence. They have created an internet troll farm that have thousands of people working there 24/7, posting comments and tweets, abusing the report system, pressing likes and dislikes, all to influence and corrupt minds. A quick search on YouTube under Russian internet troll farm reveals many videos from a variety of news channels, Time, Bloomberg, NBC, CBC, CNN, Vox, going as deep as taking interviews of people who work at those internet troll farms. If you are curious, go ahead and check them out. Their innovation continues with sponsoring YouTubers and influencers on all kinds of platforms, cyber attacks, building online communities, running targeted ads on social media. All of it to exert control and do what Russia wants. The United Kingdom's Intelligence and Security Committee conducted an investigation and concluded that Russian interference in UK politics is commonplace. And when it comes to the United States, Russia is not stingy on money. I'll read you this paragraph from Wikipedia article, which is sourced from University of Michigan Law School. Russian operatives have engaged in an online campaign to encourage supporters of the Black Lives Matter movement while also promoting opposition and violence against the group. Well, that's what they do. Their goal is to stir chaos, to divide people. I highly recommend you watch this video by Smarter Every Day, Who is Manipulating Facebook? Link in the description below. I'll show you a small excerpt from it where they talk about how Russia was able to manipulate people into physically taking action.
The next thing I want to look at are efforts to polarize society.
So even in the US, to use a much less horrific example than the Myanmar genocide, the Internet Research Agency accounts during our own election were creating events. So they were holding rallies in the real world. So there was one event in 2016 where they set up 2 protests by 2 opposing groups, and you can actually go find the footage from this on YouTube. There's people with, White Lives Matter banners standing on one side of the street screaming at members of the Islamic Cultural Center who showed up to counter protest on the other side of the street. So this is a real world in the US.
Russia pitted 2 American groups against each other in physical meat space.
Yeah, literally across the street from each other.
So unfortunately, all those billions poured in propaganda produced results. Hell, they got us all fooled by invading Ukraine in 2014 and completely getting away with it. Or invading Georgia in 2008 and completely getting away with it. Sadly, I see a frightening amount of people who repeat Russian narratives. And one of those persons I know in real life, I had a friend from college, Eric, and he now thinks Ukraine is run by neo-Nazi and thinks not helping Ukraine win is the way to go. Naturally, he's gathering all of his information from people who have no relation to Ukraine. On that note, Tucker Carlson has no relation to Ukraine. I'm not sure why, but he's completely misleading his viewers about Ukraine, deliberately lying to them. Thus, Russian propaganda frequently welcomes him on their show. Anyway, I digress. Russian influence is really strong in the world. It probably has been the strongest in my home country, Ukraine. I'll give you one example. Russian propaganda managed to corrupt the minds of Ukrainians to a point where they voted out a president who turned our army from non-existent to an army capable of resisting Russian invasion. And all this while Russia already annexed Crimea and started the war in the Donbass. Naturally, Putin was not much interested in such president leading our country for the second term. So they poured billions of dollars to blackmail him and create a lot of lies about him. And they were very successful. Only 25% of Ukrainians voted for him a second term versus a whopping 73% that voted for a comedian who has no experience in leading the country or being a commander-in-chief. Just perfect for Putin, isn't it? In the conclusion, I also haven't mentioned that Russia uses nuclear power plant constructions in other countries to exert their influence, or how they're using natural gas as a weapon, or how they tried to influence elections in the United States, or how they have an extensive network of spies all over the world, or how they went to war with Chechnya twice, all because Chechnya tried to secede Russian Empire. Actually, leader of Chechnya said that Russia is an empire too in 1994. So, I think from all the evidence that I've presented in this segment, I think modern-day Russia matches the attribute of control really well. I will explain how Russia is exploiting its colonies and what kind of legacy it's leaving behind in my next episode. Because this video was taking too long, I decided to break it apart in 2 pieces. Thank you for watching for part 1 and see you in the next episode. Also, consider sharing and commenting, subscribing if you liked it.